Okay. So, anyone familiar with this concept, this slogan, Big Brother is watching you? It's not from the TV show, of course. Has anyone read Orwell? Had a chance to? A few? Well, Orwell wrote a famous novel called 1984, in which he sort of envisions a society that is completely controlled by the party. And the party, the political entity, is involved in every aspect of our lives. And what he took is this idea of surveillance, or of monitoring and controlling people, and tried to show us a vision, and at the time this was sort of anti-communist vision, right, about what are the dangers of the closed society, or the ultimate control of government on the people. And so this, since then, has been an inspiration for a lot of people thinking about this issue, right? He wasn't obviously the first to talk about it, but he perhaps popularized it to start to think, what is that idea? And then Big Brother is watching, of course, is this idea that we are always being watched, and that someone is always there to see what we do. And it goes further than that. It's not just what we do, but it's also what we think, what we like, what we dream, what we want. Everything needs to be controlled and monitored in the society of Orwell. And so today what we're going to be thinking about is from that perspective, right? We're going to be discussing surveillance, but with a specific focus on a contrast between freedom or liberty and the emergence of what's known as surveillance capitalism. So that's going to be our topic for today. As usual, I'll do a short sort of introduction to the topic. We'll look a bit at different applications of this. I'm going to go through that quickly, quicker than usual, because I want to get to the second part. And today is going to be, again, different from other weeks, as what you guys are going to be analyzing are not scenarios anymore, but rather they are conceptions or concepts of liberty. And we're going to be looking at three of those concepts. How they've been developed, what does liberty mean, how do we achieve a state of being free as an individual within society. And this will be our sort of first touch on sort of philosophical literature. We haven't done that yet in this semester. So each one of you is going to explore a different sort of notion of freedom. We'll get to that in a minute. And then I'd like you to try and understand what does freedom mean on that concept. And then we'll discuss that. And we'll have that in mind as we look at this emergent notion of surveillance capitalism. So that's basically the plan for today. Okay, questions? Let's dive straight in. So here we start. When we're talking about AI and surveillance, there's a bit of an issue that we have to deal with straight away. And that is the question of what do we mean by surveillance? Well, typically when we say the word, use the word surveillance, we imagine these types of things: cameras, people following you, right? I brought here a famous image about facial recognition software. But we imagine, the private detective sneaking around, taking pictures of us, writing down what we're doing. In the age of AI, that concept, that idea of surveillance is going to move into the background a bit. And what we mean by surveillance is something slightly different. And we'll get to that in a second when we talk about surveillance capitalism. But that sort of individualized tracking and monitoring still exists, obviously, and it's still, of course, a threat. And let's look at some of those sort of applications of it, because later we're going to be focused more on surveillance through data, rather than this idea of surveillance by an individualized tracking system, okay? So when we think about surveillance, we can think of a great variety of issues, good and bad. And I'm going to try and sort of flesh out those intuitions, right? So, wow, their faces, I didn't really pay much attention to how weird they look. But yeah, so I was thinking about the helicopter parent. Everyone familiar with that notion, that concept? It's this idea of the overburdening, over-involved parent. Usually it's said the helicopter mom, derogatorily, right? But it definitely has nothing to do with mother or father, right? So the helicopter parent. And it's this over-involvement. And so we have, we're overburdening our children. We are sort of closely involved in everything they do. And nevertheless, there are also some positives about this, and we'll touch on them in a second, right? So that's one aspect of surveillance. It enters our family life, right? Another aspect can be between corporations. So here we see the Willy Wonka character, and this is Slugworth, who's trying to find out what is the everlasting gobstopper, right? That's sort of the idea behind the movie. Now again, funnily enough, these are image generated, right? So I guess it looks almost identical to the actor who plays Willy Wonka. So I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but again, so corporate entities are spying on each other in order to discover their secrets. They're trying to get an advantage, a leg up. So that's another aspect. It's not just in the family, it's between different corporations and organizations. Another aspect is between the state and people, either citizens or non-citizens. And this is an image about a AI tool being implemented in border control. And these are what are known as lie detecting AI systems. And the idea is that when you enter a country, this is by the EU developed, when you enter the EU, you will not stand face to face with a border control officer. Rather, you would meet this nice looking avatar, and you would interact with that avatar, and the avatar would be detecting via facial recognition software whether you are hiding or lying information, okay? Whether you're hiding information or trying to manipulate the system in any way. And how does it do that? What's the idea? Does it know the truth about something, or can it sense when you're lying? No, it's actually built on this idea that lies or manipulations come out in our facial tics, in the way we move and act, in the way our eyes move. So using all these subliminal symbols, right, or signals, that we are unaware of them, like a poker tell, people call it, those are probably extreme. The claim is that these systems can detect by your retinal movement, by the muscles in your cheeks and how they're being manipulated, whether you're hiding something or not. And then the system would say, we need a human to continue this discussion, right? It will call in someone to continue. This is a project funded by the EU. Okay, now let's look at another example of use of surveillance. Let's just see this short video and see what we think.
Since 2018, Amazon's been showing customers a new way to shop where you can just grab and go. It's Amazon Go.
So I just grab what I want and leave?
Yep.
Wow, that's so easy.
Use the Amazon Go app to enter, then start shopping.
That's it?
That's it. No lines, no checkouts, no problem. At an Amazon Go store, you can walk in, grab what you want, put it in your bag, and just go.
Oh, so you want me to just take something and walk out? Nah, son.
But it's so convenient.
No. Let's try.
We know some people are skeptical.
Some people.
Here's how it works. You use computer vision, deep learning algorithms, and sensor fusion.
Okay, so it's a trap. So where do you pay?
There's no register. It all happens with our grab-and-go technology.
But where do you pay?
You don't.
No, I do. I always pay. Okay, who do you think I am?
It's simple. Take what you want, put it in your own bag, and walk out. And we have everything you love.
Oh, hey, they have my favorite brand of kombucha.
Oh, that's great. You should grab it.
Sure. Can you grab it?
I'm just grabbing it.
You should pick it up.
Hey, it's fine.
Pick it up.
I'm learning.
If you change your mind, just put it back. Our technology will update your virtual cart instantly.
Okay. I am putting a sandwich back, y'all. I have decided to get a different sandwich today. I don't got no more sandwiches there.
So get your purchase and go.
Um,
Go ahead, leave. Just walk out.
Here we go.
You don't have to do that. You've already paid.
There's a tip. It's a tip.
You're trying to trick me.
Here we go. I told you.
It's just notifying you of your receipts.
It was him!
Alexa, search Amazon Go store Black Man Trash.
Amazon Go. No lines, no checkout. No, seriously.
This is a damn trap.
Okay, yeah, so Amazon in 2018 came out with it's a real pilot where they've created supermarkets where it connects automatically with your Amazon account. You head inside and using its technology, the Amazon Go technology, you can literally just take whatever you want and leave. That's really happening. There are these stores in the US, and it's sort of growing and becoming more popular, I think. Now, SNL did a sketch on it, right? And I thought this was thought-provoking, not only just funny, but sort of, this technology is coming in, but not everyone is really reacting in the same way. We have historical prejudices, right? We have different sort of relationships between individuals and government, or individuals and big corporation. So they were talking about, African American being over-policed, being always the target of these things. So it's a trap somehow, right? But that does raise the question. Convenience on the one hand, can we get used to this? Are there biases inside these systems? What will the problems be? So I thought that sketch sort of brings out this very delicate idea as well. Here's another interesting invention. Everyone know what that is? It's the AirTags, right? So the idea is you put that on your keys, your laptop, your backpack, whatever, and then you can find it when it's missing, right? So in the house, you forgot it in the car, whatever. Again, really, really cool, right? It's an excellent thing to use, very convenient, helps us a lot. Is that a problem or not? I don't know. We'll talk about that in a second. Now let's look at one example a bit more in detail. This is the pilot that happened in the Willesden Green station in the UK. And what they did is they took the CCTV cameras in the tube station and connected it to a new software, an AI-based software, in order to automate certain types of features that they want by using this facial recognition software. Now let's look at a few of the examples they did. So this is the process that they've sort of published that they're using. So they take the existing CCTV cameras that are working anyway 24/7, 365 days a year, and it gets connected into their new system, right? And whenever there's a problem that the system detects, according to what it's trained on, it informs one of the employees, okay? And so, for instance, the example they give, when an incident happens, a customer falls over, someone can be immediately notified about that and come and help. Then the processing unit recognizes the system and informs whoever needs to be informed. The CSS then attends to the customer, okay, or radios to another staff members to help them. So the idea is to improve service, the idea is to make it more efficient, the idea is to detect certain types of features, and let's see what they focused on. They used this pilot for 11 months as a test trial to see how it goes. And the system was designed to work on 77 different cases. Of these 77 cases, they chose to implement 11 of them. Now let's see what kinds of cases they chose to implement. So they wanted the system to detect hazards, unattended items, if a person is on the track, unauthorized access, that means someone is entering without paying a ticket, for instance, things like that. Stranded customers, if someone is stuck for some reason, something's not working, lost. Safeguarding, crime and antisocial behavior. Crowd movement, so they want to know sort of when people are entering the station, how often, where do they go, what patterns they are. And this is meant to sort of then make it easier for the train station to perhaps bring more trains at a certain time, perhaps to spread out certain things, so to make traveling more efficient. Injured, unwell persons, if someone needs help, and mobility assistance. Okay, so these are the 11 cases that they wanted the system to detect. And here's sort of some of the results from the pilot. First I brought 3 examples of how it, when it creates an alert. So one of the examples in their report that they brought was that if a person is sitting for 10 minutes on a bench, it indicates an alert to the staff, saying that there's probably something wrong going on. So that was the threshold that they chose. So if anyone is sitting there, maybe they fell asleep, maybe they're drunk, maybe they're lost, maybe something is wrong, and that one of the employees needs to be informed. Another example, if someone is standing in the ticket hall for at least 15 minutes, so perhaps a potential thief, perhaps someone, again, lost, doesn't know the way. So again, these are another indicator that they used to create alerts. And finally, if anyone was 30 seconds over the yellow line, right, too close to the tracks, it immediately informed the employee. And what happened was this triggered also an alert on the PA system, so that it announced automatically, beware, trains come. It gave an announcement to jolt people that maybe they're standing there, right, not concentrated. And finally, throughout these 11 months, the system detected 26,000 cases of fare evasion. So 26,000 cases of someone either hopping the rail, someone not paying a ticket, two people walking in together, these types of different kinds of fare evasion. Now, they didn't take any action on these fare evasions. It was just a pilot, and they decided in advance that they're just going to monitor and see how the system works without actually taking action on that. So they go into a lot of details over this in their report. But I would say that's a huge find if this is accurate, right? If 26,000 times over a year, people are basically not paying for a ticket, that would be something in interest of the train station. They would want to know that, to prevent that. Okay, but let's see some of the problems that the system had. For instance, one of the problems was they wanted to know when someone is trying to tailgate. Tailgating is when two people cross with one ticket. But they had a problem distinguishing between adults and children. Okay? Because what they gave the system to learn for a tailgate was if the person isn't high enough, isn't tall enough. So if the person is underneath a specific line, it meant that that's a child for the system. Whereas if the person is above or taller than that imaginary line, that's how the system sort of distinguished between adult and child, and tailgating in that sense, right? So they had to find creative ways to make the system learn how to do that. So that was one of the solutions they found. Is that a good solution, bad solution? Well, of course it has problems, but that was the solution they found. Another issue, remember, they wanted to detect violent behavior. So they had a lot of problems. How do we teach the system to understand violent behavior? And one of their proxies was when people raise their hands up. That was the proxy they used. Because, again, that's a threatening gesture. Perhaps I'm trying to hit someone. Maybe I'm raising a weapon of some kind. And here are some examples of cases where it was a bit strange, where the system detected it, but falsely, right? So a person putting up a poster was detected as a violent behavior. This person here, I don't know what they're doing. They're trying to read the sign, perhaps. And this one, I don't know what they're doing here, something. But so that proxy, again, was problematic. And there's a huge question. How do we distinguish between violent and non-violent behavior? We need to teach the system to do that somehow. And it's a huge challenge. So these were the types of challenges that they had to sort of deal with in implementing this system. Okay, but this just happened this year. So the pilot just ended. And I don't know what will be the next step of it. Perhaps they're going to roll out this system more widely. But if anyone's interested, write me and I'll send the report, because it's quite interesting to read, to see it in more detail. Okay, let's go back to that AirTag that I talked about. Remember I said this is a cool thing, this is an interesting thing. Well, it turns out that with a price point of just $29, it has become the weapon of choice for stalkers and abusers. AirTag stalking has become a huge issue, especially for women, because what's happening is that an AirTag is being glued without them noticing to their bags, to their cars, to some piece of clothing. And then they're being basically tracked by a group of predators where they can just walk after them with the phone. They know exactly where you are at all times. And a lot of women have complained about this, and the police cannot really offer any assistance on this issue, right? So that has become a huge deal. And the problem is this. We're creating this incredible technology which may have huge benefits, but in the end, for $29, we're giving surveillance equipment to anyone who wants it. Anyone at all can now afford this. Become a CIA agent, practically. You don't need skills to use an AirTag, trust me. We talked about Amazon and Amazon Go, right? Again, an interesting idea. In 2012, Amazon presented a patent for a delivery system designed to reduce delivery time by predicting what users will buy before they were actually buying it and shipping the product to their homes, even before the sale was made. This is called the Method and System for Anticipatory Shipping Package. And the idea behind it was very simple. We have enough data to predict what you're going to buy. It's cheaper for us to send it to your house and have you return whatever you don't want. And keep whatever you like. They calculated that it's worth it for them, that there'll be enough purchases to make it cost efficient. So imagine in a few years, you're not going to have to go even on Amazon anymore. The packages will just arrive at your house. And you don't like them, you send them back. But mostly you will like them. That's what they're expecting. So that's incredible. That is the power of data. And this is what I meant by shifting our focus from the surveillance methods of the AirTag, which of course exists and it's a huge issue and it's very important to talk about that. But when it comes to AI systems, I think the big deal is this. This is the big new thing here. The use of huge amounts of data to change the way we think about everything in life. And no longer to track a tie as an individual, but rather to track me and my digital footprint as a potential customer. Right? It's no longer about me and whether someone wants to blackmail me or embarrass me or whatnot. No. It's just to use the data in order to understand to what category do I belong. And if I belong to that category, then I can use that. In business, in banking, in insurance, in almost every economic aspect of our lives. And perhaps even to get packages before I even thought that I want them. Maybe. Okay, so that was just a few examples about surveillance, and I tried to touch on sort of different aspects. There are a lot more things we could have talked about. For instance, how, when we talk about the AirTags, how abusive relationships are sort of using these types of technologies horrifically, how partners are tracking each other by looking at their electrical current usage, right, to know whether they're at work or not, where they're going or not. So there are really smart ways that these tracking and surveillance technologies are allowing us to create domineering relationships between individuals, right? And we're not talking about that, but I brought that up just so you know this is all over the map. And hopefully, this sort of brief overview gave you this idea that yes, this is a huge topic, and unfortunately, we're just going to have to look at one specific narrative of it. And what is that one specific narrative that I want to focus on? It's the question of freedom, of liberty. And I brought here a quote from Rousseau, and he says that man is born free, and everywhere he is in chains. This is the opening sentence of The Social Contract, the seminal work of Rousseau, and of modern liberalism, some would say. It's this idea that we have the right to natural freedom, and yet we're constantly being oppressed in one way or another. And what we're going to do now, oh yeah, and here's the image that generated from this sentence. So I wrote, this was the prompt I gave it. Man is born free and everywhere is in chains, and yeah. Every time I use the word freedom, you'll see it's a pattern here. For some reason, they gave me things with chains, naked people, and black and white. I don't know why those correlate somehow, but that was sort of the images that came up. And you'll see soon though, a few more examples. Yeah. Okay, so what are we going to do now? We're going to split up into 3 groups. So I hope you found it interesting. Here are sort of, now we're going to talk about the 3 notions of liberty. And the first one is called freedom as non-interference, right? Now, who had that group? Who thinks they had that topic? Whose group would define freedom as non-interference? Would it be you guys? Probably, yeah. Yeah, it would, yes. Freedom as non-interference sort of put the emphasis on this idea that so long as I'm not being interfered with, I have remained a free person. Right? And then I brought here 2 examples. This is the Leviathan by Hobbes, who's considered the sort of modern beginning of English political philosophy, right? And for those of you who do not know, the Leviathan, here, this guy in the picture, is constructed of a lot of tiny, tiny pictures, actually. Tiny, tiny people, sorry. And the idea is that those tiny, tiny people form the state. This represents the state, right? And then on the other side, I brought Nozick's book. So he's a libertarian, 20th century. So you can see extreme opposites. Monarchical ideas compared to libertarian ideas, but both share the common intuition that liberty should be understood as the curtailment or the idea of not being interfered with, right? Non-interference as the core essence of what it means to be free. And then in your text, just one passage from it. The defense of liberty consists in the negative goal of warding off interference. The paradigmatic idea of the non-interference picture would be the image of the highwayman. And the highwayman points the gun at you and says, your money or your life, right? The highwayman blocks you physically and holds the gun and interferes in your life. This is what freedom as non-interference perceives as the ultimate assailment on our freedom. Now, Hobbes is famously quoted as saying, well, this is only an interference with my body, and that's sufficient for understanding liberty. The interference in my will does not count, because what Hobbes says, or at least that's what it's claimed, he says that in this case, it's not only that your will is not being interfered with, it's not only that you're unwillingly going to give the money, but you're very willingly going to give the money in this case, right? So it is not that your will has been coerced here, right, according to Hobbes. It's only that your body is, because you're willingly going to hand over that money. That's the idea. Anyway, I heard another issue coming up there, and this is an important point, and this is a quote from Tani. It says that freedom for the pike is death for the minnow. Now, whoever's heard of that, the idea is that freedom for someone always means less freedom for someone else, right? And this is sort of what Mid-Journey thought that would be appropriate for this notion. Yeah, and that comes up in this idea of non-interference very much. That in society, it is inevitable that your freedom will be hurt. Because absolute freedom for someone means absolute death for someone else. No one can have absolute freedom in a society on this conception, right? There will always be a trade-off. We will always have to balance things out by creating security, by ensuring justice, by taxing, whatnot, okay? Contrasting that with our second notion of freedom comes from the tradition that says that freedom is not non-interference. Freedom should be understood as non-domination. Non-domination. Now, who sort of thinks they had this idea of non-domination in their view? Maybe I didn't put enough quotes of domination inside there, but let me answer it. So maybe this a bit helps, right? So the origins of this notion comes from the Roman Republic, right? The idea of the ancient Roman Republic is that the contrast is always between freedom and slavery. Always. To be free is not to be a slave. And to be a slave is the ultimate lack of freedom. And so from this Roman tradition, it was adopted throughout the ages in Machiavelli's thinking about princedoms in Italy, right? About Thomas Paine's thinking and the ultimate motivation for the American Revolution that came. This idea that we are always unfree if we are put in the position of slavery. And here's one quote again from that position. Liberty solely consists in an independency upon the will of another. And by the name of slave, we understand a man who can neither dispose of his person nor goods, but enjoys all at the will of his master. Sydney. So, of course, this is the Republican tradition. And so what came up in your talk about freedom, and what do you think would be the Republican take on surveillance? Interesting, yeah. So when we're talking about freedom as non-domination, we're thinking about three principles. And this is by Philip Pettit, who is the contemporary advocate or greatest advocate of Republican liberty. And he says that we are dominated or we are unfree in terms of non-domination when another person has the capacity to interfere. So we came back to the interference that we talked about before, but with two caveats. With impunity and at will. There are no repercussions to that interference, and it's according to their will, in certain choices that others are in a position to make. So in my choices. So interference with impunity and at will that is not mine. So you guys touched on all those points. It's very good. So that's the idea of the freedom of non-domination. And again, the ultimate perspective of what is it to be dominated or unfree is the slave. And this is the prompt master and slave, and this is what I got. Why not? Again, I don't know why this is what it's giving me. But here's another picture of it, right, from the movie 12 Years a Slave. And that's the idea. When all of the interference that is done to me is controlled by another, I have lost my liberty. And this caveat is important because it actually enables something else. And in order to understand that, I brought here a famous painting, sorry, before I get to the painting, this is the prompt that I gave Odysseus in the Sirens, and this is what I got. So this is the story from the Odyssey, and this is the famous painting that portrays the same scene by John William Waterhouse. And you see Ulysses or Odysseus is tied here in the middle of the ship, and surrounding him are the sirens coming to lure him onto the island. Now all his colleagues are in the boat, they're rowing, and their ears are blocked so they can't hear the call of the sirens, because Odysseus was told that he who hears the call of the sirens will never leave the island, right? They're drawn to it and you will never leave. So Odysseus asks them to tie him to the mast, and even if I beg you, he says, don't let me go. Ignore my wishes. For the Republican concept of freedom, Odysseus is completely free. Odysseus is not unfree in this scenario. Whereas according to Mill, according to Berlin, this is a huge infringement on liberty. Yes?
How is he free?
He's free because he's being interfered on his will. He has sanctioned the interference. And that allows it, sort of. And let's look at an example, a more contemporary example of this type of Republican interference. This is taken from Curb Your Enthusiasm. Let's see.
You hungry?
Starving.
Good, we got a great meal and some fabulous desserts. Which, by the way, I need you to keep me away from no matter what.
Okay.
Yeah? Because
Yeah.
I put a lot of time into this. I need like a dessert referee.
All right, I'm your guy.
You promise?
Yeah, I promise.
Okay, I'm counting on you.
All right.
No. I'm just gonna have a bite.
No.
Just a bite, come on.
You know what? You told me specifically not to let you have any dessert.
I appreciate it, Larry, but I changed my mind.
Yes. But you said no matter what.
But you know what? I'm changing it, and this is now I'm saying thank you for helping me. I'm gonna have some cake.
No, but you can't change it. That's why you say no matter what. This is the what.
But now
That's why you asked me and not these other people, because you knew I wouldn't let you.
But wait, Larry,
She told me not to let her out, okay? She said no matter what, okay?
Okay. Whoever hasn't seen Curb Your Enthusiasm, I highly, highly recommend it. It has so many great philosophical ideas in it. And it's just hilarious, in my opinion. But yeah, according to the Republican notion of freedom, what Larry did was not curtailing her freedom in any way, right? So that creates for us a scheme of things in which the notion of non-interference and the notion of non-domination, which both belong to this family of group called negative liberty, liberty defined as being protected from something, as something not being there, interference or domination, it creates an asymmetry between these positions. So if I'm a prisoner, I'm both being interfered with and dominated. So both conceptions would agree this is bad. And of course, if I'm not being interfered with and not dominated, if I'm a free person, there's no problem at all. Where they differ is about these two squares. So think of the case of Larry and Odysseus. There was interference, but that interference did not amount to domination because it was at the behest of the agent. According to non-domination liberty, Odysseus and Larry, or Odysseus and the woman in the video, are completely free. They're not being dominated, so there's no problem with that. On the other side, when there's no interference but there is domination, the two theories would disagree. Imagine a benevolent dictator. Someone who is, Kim Jong-un, but he loves his people, right? And allows them anything they want, okay? Putin that doesn't have elections, or he just, gives you all your rights, but he's a dictator. You don't need elections, right? It's unnecessary. For the freedom is non-interference, this is not a problem at all. Living under a dictatorship, you can be completely free, so long as they're not interfering in your life. For the Republicans, this is repugnant. It doesn't matter if there's actual interference. The Republicans care about your status. your status of being potentially interfered with. The potential for interference is enough for you to be deemed unfree. You are a slave, just by the very fact that Kim or Vladimir can decide one morning that, oh, let's take 10,000 of you to a camp at their own whim. Okay, so that's where the negative liberty two positions sort of differ and distinguish themselves. Now let's flip the coin and we'll look at a conception of liberty that is known as positive liberty. Now, positive liberty, unlike the negative source, tells us that liberty is a function of something happening, of something being there in place, as opposed to something not being there. Interference, domination. But what is that something that positive liberty tries to flesh out? Well, if we look back historically, Aristotle said that man is by nature a political animal. And the idea of positive liberty constantly comes back to the notion of what is our nature. If we can fulfill our nature, we are aligning with what it means to be a free person, a free man, through the fulfillment of our nature. So an Aristotelian would tell us that politics, and later on in the 20th century, Hannah Arendt sort of took this idea up again. Politics is freedom, Hannah Arendt said. And that's the very idea, the notion that we fulfill our nature and thus become free. T.H. Green wrote that real freedom consists in the whole man having found his object. To attain freedom is thus to have attained harmony with the true law of one's being. To speak of the freedom of a man is to speak of the state in which he shall have realized his ideal of himself. Freedom is the realization of self-mastery, of self-control, of fulfilling our nature. Now, how does that come up in Rousseau's articulation of that you guys read? And so you hear in Rousseau's conception, as I brought it here today, he's a complex writer, obviously there are a lot of ideas in there, but in these specific excerpts, it is the idea of fulfilling something which allows us to attain freedom. Whereas Mill and probably the Republican would say, freedom means do whatever you want. The positive notion of freedom defines what it is you need to do in order to be free. So it can be the arrested Buddhist monk who is completely free, even though he's in prison, because he has attained the higher level of freedom, spiritual freedom. It doesn't matter what is happening to his body on this conception of positive liberty. Or we can think about Nietzsche, who writes that the overman, the Übermensch, who has organized the chaos of his passions, given style to his character, and become creative, aware of life's terrors, he affirms life without resentment. He understands the nature of being and existing in life and attains it. That is the sense of freedom. The terror of life cannot curtail your freedom. Or if we think about Rousseau, a quote from your passage, whoever refuses to obey the general will be forced to do so by the entire body. This means merely that he will be forced to be free. And that is the extreme articulation of positive liberty. One can be forced to be free because it has nothing to do with interference or domination. That is just irrelevant. I can be in prison and free, right? I can be forced to be free because freedom is the attainment of something. That is the positive conception. And when Isaiah Berlin analyzes these historical notions, he's a philosopher of ideas. He does what's known as a genealogy, the evolution of concepts. He says that the positive liberty is what bred to life totalitarianism. It is what's brought to life Nazism, but also Aristotelianism. A lot can be hidden inside that notion of positive freedom. The only question is how you feel that content. What is it that we need to attain to be free? And so the question becomes, on this conception of freedom, can surveillance be a positive or a negative force? Well, I guess it will very closely depend on how we understand what it is to be achieved, but there is no necessary contradiction between the two. If surveillance and manipulation pushes me in the right direction of attaining my true nature, all I'm doing is being forced to be free. No problem. So it really depends on how we understand freedom, our analysis of the benefits and harms of surveillance. And sort of to take a closer look at that, we're going to look at this new concept that has been born. And I attribute this to Shoshana Zuboff. She wrote an incredible book on this notion called The Age of Surveillance Capitalism. We're going to be focusing on that. She's a Harvard professor, a psychologist, and it's a fascinating book. I really recommend it. And instead of sort of presenting ideas from there myself, what I've done now is collected case studies that Shoshana Zuboff sort of analyzes. We're going to look at them together. So first, we're going to start by trying to understand what is this notion of surveillance capitalism? How has it been born? And then we'll look at a few examples of what's going on around us. And this is linked to the emergence of big data and AI very closely. So, our big friend here will follow us for the rest of the class. And these are some quotes from interviews that Zuboff had with different developers working in the industry. One famous quote says that nowadays there's a computer in the middle of virtually every single transaction we make. Economical, social, whatever. Now that they are available, these computers have several other uses, and he identifies 4 such uses. Remember, this is the origins of surveillance capitalism. We're talking about the early 2000s now. Data extraction and analysis, one use. New contractual forms due to better monitoring, second use. Personalization and customization, and continuous experiments. We've moved away from the physical into the digital, and these are the benefits of computers being present everywhere. And we're going to try and understand these different types of powers that are emerging, these new dynamic that's coming up. At Google, the cycle was similarly oriented towards the individual as its subject in the beginning. We want to take your data in order to improve what we're giving to you. And we hear this until today. We're collecting data to improve our product. This is the basic explanation of every single app that you're going to use or product that you're using. It floated outside the marketplace as interaction with users rather than a market transaction with customers. Google had no customers. It had users. And this is the first time. We have a company without a product. What is going on here? How are they going to make money? This cycle created what's known as the behavior value investment. And the idea was that the user, starting here, provides us with data. The data goes into the search engine that learns from you. It improves the search result and it comes back to the user as benefit. Let's say you were looking to learn how to screw in a light bulb. And you typed that in Google. And then you clicked on a link and you spent some amount of time on that link. Google will now learn that this is probably a good link. It provided you with the information you needed. So we'll up that link that others will see it quicker. Let's say you typed in that you want to learn how to do, I don't know, basic coding, and it led you to a website that teaches it. Excellent. Google will match that and learn from what you are seeking to provide better search results. That is the good investment cycle. Your search queries go back into the engine and make the results better. But, and here's the problem, as I said, there's no money to be made that way. So, the idea of being able to deliver a particular message to a particular person at just the moment when it might have a high probability of actually influencing his or her behavior was, and it always been, the holy grail of advertising. The more I know exactly what you are looking for and exactly what answers what you are looking for, creates a lot of potential for advertising. And Google sort of fixated on that and understood that they have something new in their hands. In other words, Google will no longer mine behavioral data strictly to improve services, but rather to read the user's mind for the purpose of matching ads to their interests, as those interests are deduced from the collateral traces of online behavior. The more you use Google, the more people use Google, the more it profiles what you're interested in, what is concerning you, what you would like to know, what you would like to learn, and it starts creating those matches. But not to improve its search engine, but rather to provide advertisers better data. New data sets were compiled that would dramatically enhance the accuracy of these predictions. We are entering the age of predictions. These data sets were referred to as user profile information, or UPI. These new data meant that there would be no more guesswork and far less waste in advertising budget. Mathematical certainty would replace all that. So we're transitioning from advertising as a gimmick or as a slogan that would capture people to going to what became later as targeted advertisement, right? The more I know about you, the more I know what to show you. User profile information, the UPIs, may include information about an individual user or a group of users. Such information may be provided by the user, but not only. It can be provided by third party authorized to release user information. So I don't have to always collect data only from you. I can collect data from things around you. Remember those little consent cookies that you always agree to? That is the bread and butter that allows the sharing of data all the time. And or derived from users' actions. I don't have to actually see what you did. I can derive what someone like you would do because I've seen other people do it already. So I know someone who's interested in perfume and in magnesium. What can I derive from that? A woman who's interested in, oh, maybe most of you are too young for that, but we can derive that she's pregnant, okay? Just from her habits of buying different kinds of perfume and a specific medication, magnesium, which is the most commonly purchased supplement for pregnant women. And that was one of the findings. We can know before you that you're pregnant. Very easy. By what you're shopping. Certain user information can be deduced or presumed, right? UPI may be associated with various entities. Okay. Behavioral data whose value had previously been used up, right? I was only interested in the search in order to improve, now became the pivotal and exclusive to Google raw material. This is what is known as surplus behavioral data, which became the gold dust of the industry. And we'll see in a second what that is. Google's invention destroyed the reciprocities of its original social contract with users. The role of the behavioral value reinvestment cycle that we just talked about, that had once aligned Google with its users, that the information you gave came back to you in improved search, was no longer. Now it's for other ends, and let's look at those other ends. Now, this is the behavioral data cycle that we started with, and this is what's happening behind the scene. Your data no longer goes directly from the user and back to the user, but it goes through this slightly adjusted system. Surplus data can be, for instance, and this, I had never known about this. You know how sometimes you type in Google and it asks you, well, did you mean blah, blah, blah? And that's usually really accurate, right? It's spell checking, it's giving you what you actually meant to say. And the way they did that was by actually monitoring and recording every single search you did, but also every single mistaken search you made, and then you went back and corrected it. So let's say I misspelled something, and then I erased it, and then spelled it again. Google has cataloged that motion of erasing that word, and has trained its system on it so that it can tell you what you actually were meaning to do. Because most of the mistakes we make are herd mentality. Everyone's making the same mistakes, often. The idea is that we're no longer interested in just what you searched. We're interested in everything around that in order to create a new market known as the market in future behavior. This is where the money is going to come from. And let's see how much money we're talking about. In 2001, Google's revenues jumped to 86 million. Well, that doesn't sound like that much, right? Well, it's a 400% increase from 2000, so it's quite big. By 2002, the cash began to flow and has never stopped. Definite evidence that behavioral surplus combined with Google's proprietary analytics Revenue leapt to 347 million in 2002, then to 1.5 billion in 2003, then to 3.5 billion in 2004, and that's the year when it went public. And it's just been going up and up and up, right? All on the exact same product. No product at all. What is the product? All of us. We are not just the product, we are the material as well. We provide Google with all this data, and then it uses this data to make all its money. It's as simple as that. This is the origins of surveillance capitalism. Now let's look at a few examples. So we're moving now from the origins of surveillance capitalism from predictions to actions. We've collected all the data, now we want to make people dance. And how do we do that? So let's see a few examples of how this is done. And no one has done this better than our friends at Facebook. The intelligence of the Internet of Things means that sensors can also be actuators. It can move you around. It doesn't just sense and record. It can move. It's no longer simply about ubiquitous computing. Now the real aim is ubiquitous intervention, action, and control. The real power is that now you can modify real-time actions in the real world by the use of data. So let's look at one example. I'm going to skip this. Behavioral modifications, tuning, herding, conditioning, let's skip that. Google said in 2018, the future is private. Our mission is to connect every person in the world. You don't do that by having a service people pay for. Well, again, Google is a company that is not selling anything to you. We are not the clients. And we have to remember that. Someone else is the client. In 2012 came out an article called A 61 Million Person Experiment in Social Influence and Political Mobilization, done in Facebook. And what the article said is that they conducted an experiment. One group was shown a statement at the top of their newsfeed encouraging the users to vote. Go vote. It included a link to polling place information, an actionable button reading, I voted. So after you vote, you can push the button and you get I voted. And it showed a counter indicating how many other Facebook users, your friends, reported that they've already voted, with 6 of their pictures, your friends that have already voted. A second group received the same information but without the pictures of a friend, and the third group did not receive any special messages. 61 million people, suddenly Facebook started doing this at once. And let's see what were the results of their experiment. The Facebook experimenters determined that social messaging was an effective means of tuning behavior at scale. It directly influenced political self-expression. Let's look at some of the statistics they found. The team calculated that the manipulated social messages sent 60,000 additional voters to the polls in 2010 midterms. By creating that message, they could create 60,000 new voters. And those 60,000 voters affected another 280,000 as a result of what's called the social contagion. Oh, my friend's going to vote, I should go vote also, and so on. So a total of 340,000, according to their calculations, were sent out to vote by this small experiment. Now, if we look at the margins of an election in the US, in 2016, Clinton needed 78,000 votes in a few key states to have won the elections against Trump. In 2020, had Trump got 42,000 more votes, he would have won the elections. Facebook just manipulated 320,000 voters to go out and vote. That means that in certain scenarios, Facebook could have sealed this election, one side or the other. That's the power of data. Small messaging, pushing people out to do something. And remember our thoughts about liberty. Is this a curtailment of our liberty? Is this maybe a good thing? And even if this is a good thing, is this something that harms us as liberal people, as autonomous and free people? Let's look at another example. Experimental evidence of massive scale emotional contagion through social networks. Again, our friends at Facebook, this time 2014. What do they want to do this time? The experimenters manipulated the extent to which people, 700,000 people, were exposed to emotional expressions in their news feeds. They changed the content you would see on your news feed in order to see what impact that had on your emotional state. So here's the example. Half of the people were shown positive messages, while half were shown negative messages. And they wanted to see, would this cause you to imitate and post content that is aligned with those messages? Can I force you, basically, to post negative messages or positive messages? By these unconscious sort of nudges and pushes. And they concluded that yes, emotional states can be transferred to others via emotional contagion, leading people to experience the same emotions without their awareness. Online messages influence our experience of emotions, which may affect a variety of offline behaviors. And this, of course, leads us to the big question, or the big scandal known as the Cambridge Analytica. Here, no longer Facebook is the bad guys on their own, but it was a small group in the UK. And it started off with these two nice people, Alexander Nix and Christopher Wiley. And they created this company called Cambridge Analytica. That had nothing to do with Cambridge, actually. It's just the name that they gave it. Their offices were there, but they weren't affiliated with the university, right? And what Christopher Wiley and Alexander Nix did is they called their friend, Steve Bannon, from the US, and they told him, Steve-O, we have a new way to use data and information. Steve went back to the US and contacted Robert Mercer, the billionaire, and said, we need some money, and he funded them $15 million to run this experiment using data for political manipulation. Now what happened is, then came Alexander Kogan. Now Kogan designed a survey called This Is Your Digital Life. And the survey was supposed to be an academic study into how we can profile you according to your content and data on Facebook. Kogan put up this survey on Facebook with the agreement of Facebook. Facebook agreed here. This is the only role that Facebook basically played. And 270,000 users participated in for $1 or $2. They got paid to allow Kogan to access their Facebook profile and to answer a survey. What they didn't know is that by accepting this proposal, that actually given access to Kogan to every single friend on their list as well, and to all the data on those Facebook pages. And so from 270,000 people, they could mine anywhere between 50 to 80 million profiles, okay, by exponential growth. And they did that. They mined those profiles, and here's what they came up with. Once Cambridge Analytica's data scientists had all the data on you that they could find, the first step was to sort you into very specific personality categories. They would score you according to the big 5 personality traits. How open to new experiences are you? Whether you prefer planning over spontaneity, how much an extrovert or an introvert you are, what extent you are pro-social, and how prone you are to experiencing negative emotions like anger and fear. They ranked every single profile according to these categories and put you within those categories. After they had that, the second step was to apply the predictive algorithms to your profile and calculate on a scale from 0 to 100 how likely you were to vote, for instance, how likely you were to engage politically in a certain issue. So now they have your personality, they know your political inclinations. The third step was to figure out where you hung out so that they could get to you. Did you watch much TV? Were you a YouTuber? Was there a social media platform they preferred? Cambridge Analytica would then show you specific content designed for people in your category and check whether it worked out or not. Did you engage with this content? Did you click on it? Did you like it? And then they tweaked it a little bit. They changed it slightly all the time until they got what is the exact thing that will speak to the people of this category. And it's all digital, so they can run it, a million different variations. Now imagine, right, a ChatGPT sitting behind this. Not a group of people designing these systems, but actually an algorithm working every second of the day, creating millions and millions of these tweaked little versions. It's quite easy to do that. At least 2 elements made Cambridge Analytica digital campaign particularly dangerous. First, they showed dramatically different content to different people. Second, their campaign did not look like a campaign. They showed you content that was meant to impact your emotional state. Sometimes they would show you pictures. Sometimes they look like news articles. Other times they look like content created by ordinary users. Is it a grassroots? Is it funded by a political campaign? Unclear. And all what they wanted to do is use this manipulation and this data in order to push you to vote one direction or not. If I know that you are susceptible to anger, I can push those buttons very easily. And let's look how Facebook actually did that in 2016. In Australia, so this should speak to a lot of you guys, maybe you've heard about this. In 2016, Facebook came to its marketing division in Australia and New Zealand and told them, we have enough data on 6.5 million Australians, school age and young adults, and we have enough data to tell you the following. We can tell you when a young person needs a confidence boost and is therefore most vulnerable to a specific configuration of advertising cues and nudges. By monitoring posts, pictures, interactions, and internet activity, Facebook can work out when young people feel stressed, defeated, overwhelmed, anxious, nervous, stupid, silly, useless, and a failure. And once I know any of these things about you, I can offer you that jacket that you need just to feel good on your date next week. And I'll give you even a coupon for it. Why not? The Wall Street Journal reported that since 2007, Facebook has run 1,000 experiments on us. Without any ethics committee to tell them how to do it, without any university regulations to say what is okay and what not, without having to reveal this to anyone in the public. And this is ongoing, right? And here's one last example. Has anyone ever heard of Pokemon Go? It's a fun game. It's pretty cute. Pokemon Go was created by a nice small company called Niantic, but actually Niantic is a company owned by Google. Niantic is owned by Google, or it's their primary investor. The CEO of Niantic developed Google Maps. He worked there for a long time, and then he went off and built Niantic. And what they did actually was generate this augmented reality game, but the real game, what was happening behind and underneath the surface. One game was us running around the city trying to find Pokemons. The other game was Niantic selling sponsorships to stores, telling them, we can bring people to your shop. We'll place a Pokemon in Starbucks. And no longer do you need to pay for click traffic like you do online, but you can pay now for foot traffic. So it's no longer just manipulating you online, what you're going to think, what you're going to see. No, it's literally pushing you to physically go to a specific place. Now, we've run out of time, and the question we have to leave ourselves with is, okay, it's all these cases, right? Do they harm our liberty? Are they taking something away from our freedom? Does surveillance capitalism create a new danger to us as individuals or to us as a society? Unfortunately, we'll have to end with that terrifying idea, but keep it in mind. Maybe we can analyze it a bit more next time.